when I came on board, I can't recall being briefed on that subject in particular, but over the course of the little over 2 years that I was there, I mean, there obviously were occasions where we had EEO issues come up. Sure.
Right. Did you become aware that a number of the complaints had been pending for a considerable period of time before your arrival with the service?
Had been pending for a long time? I can't recall that now.
Do you recall being made aware of any complaints made by Matthew Fogg?
No.
Do you met Mr. Fogg is sitting beside me at a council table here in the courtroom. Do you recall Mr. Fogg? Did you see him?
Now that I see him, I recognize the face.
All right. What do you recall about Mr. Fogg from your days at the service?
I recognize the face.
Going back to the promotion given to Mr. Earp, is it pronounced Earp?
I pronounce it Earp.
Earp. What is Mr. Earp's race?
White.
How long have you known Mr. Earp?
That's hard to say. It would have been sometime after 1981. I don't know if he was, I don't know when he joined the Marshals Service, but the U.S. Attorney's Office was relatively small. The U.S. Marshal's office in Tallahassee was relatively small. So the marshals knew the assistants and vice versa. Whenever he would have come on board, I would have had an opportunity to get to know him.
Mr. Earp had been a deputy United States Marshal in Tallahassee.
That's right.
While you were in the United States Attorney's Office there.
Right.
When you selected Mr. Earp for this position, did you give any consideration to selecting anybody other than James Comfort for the other position?
I don't know. I mean, you know, as I said, typically there would have been a round table discussion, and you know, without knowing any of the other candidates, if the consensus was that he was the #1 pick, then you know, I assume that that's what I did. I went along with that recommendation.
Your Honor, do you recall specifically if you had a round table discussion as you described on this?
Not on this particular case.
All right. Is it possible that you may just have made this decision on your own in your office?
Objection, speculative.
You want me to answer it?
Please.
Sure.
Just on my own, I doubt it.
But you don't recall specifically?
No.
All right. Now, going to Defense Exhibit Number 5, which is the April 15th, 1991. Do you have that defense number?
You want my 5?
Yeah, you have his 5. I don't have it here. I've got a copy. Well, take a look at this, Your Honor.
Okay.
I think that's the same
Here's
one.
number 5.
Okay. Now, did I hear you correctly, Your Honor, saying that this is essentially the same position that was involved in the promotion that went to Mr. Earp?
Yes.
I would call your attention to the note at the bottom where it says it's a term appointment not to exceed 3 years. Is that a distinction between the two promotions?
If it is, it was certainly not one that I recognized.
All right. Now, do you recall specifically discussing this promotion with anybody in the service?
This was the ARP promotion?
No, this is the Exhibit Number 5 is the promotion that went to Mr. Fogg.
Specifically, no.
And you testified that in one of your reasons for not going strictly off the scores was because you were concerned that headquarters was biasing the scores in some way to favor people with headquarters experience. Is that fair?
Right.
Well, what was the basis for that concern?
I think my conversation with Ken Alecko and how they arrived at these scores.
Do you recall specifically what Mr. Alecko said?
No, I don't, but and I say I believe it was with Ken, but I was certainly left with the impression, and I'm not, I can't say for certain where I got it from, but that headquarters was considered more valuable experience, and that because it was considered more valuable experience, then when individuals were rated, if they had headquarters experience versus field experience, that they would be more favorably scored.
All right. Do you know if any of the people on the list who had scores higher than Mr. Earp had headquarters experience?
No.
Do you know if Mr. Fogg had headquarters experience?
No.
Now, the job that Mr. Earp got was a headquarters job, I take it.
Yes.
Did he report directly to you?
Not directly to me, no. There was probably a deputy director, an associate director, and a division chief, and for all I know, there may have even been a supervisor in between the director and that position.
You also testified that you had exercised your discretion to promote African Americans. Do you recall how many?
I don't, but I was asked that question at not just African Americans, but Hispanics and women before, and without, I know that, for example, Tony Perez, I appointed him as head of the enforcement division. I appointed Don Horton, who was a black male, as head of the court security division. I promoted Linda Riemann, who was a white female, to head of the procurement division. I appointed B.B. Brown as head of the budget division, and these were all, I believe that there were probably others that fell into either black, Hispanic, female, or combination thereof during the time I was in the Marshal Service. And all these positions were, I believe, they were at a level higher than, for example, the GS-13 level. So, there were active efforts to promote minorities within the service while I was there.
Thank you. Your Honor, was Mr. Perez, or is Mr. Perez an African American?
No, he's Hispanic.
All right. You testified that Mr. Horton is African American?
Yes.
Miss Linda Reams, is that her?
Linda Riemann.
Reemans, and she is...
She's a white female.
All right. And how about B.B. Brown?
She's a black female.
Okay. Now, in terms of the senior staff at headquarters, the senior executive support service supporting your position, were any of those African Americans?
Did I appoint any?
Were there any at any time while you were there who were African Americans?
Well, I would consider those senior. What are you talking
I'm talking about senior executive service positions.
I think we only had during the time that I was there, there may have been, I think there were 2 SES positions when I got there, and we may have been given a 3rd while I was there, and none of them were African American, those 3.
Your Honor, do you recall a meeting sometime in 1992 with a gentleman by the name of Wallace Roney, who was a representative of the Marshals Union and with other deputy marshals present, in which he met with you and some other Marshals Service officials?
No.
Okay. Do you recall generally expressions of concern by the leadership of the black deputy marshals about problems in the service?
Yes.
What do you recall about those?
I think that there was concern throughout the service about our efforts to recruit and retain and promote minorities in the service.
Now, by minorities, are you referring to all minorities, or
All minorities.
were there also specific concerns about recruiting, retaining, and promoting African Americans?
Within that general concern, I think there was, sure.
Well, within that general concern, was it your position that as long as a minority was recruited, retained, or promoted, that took care of the situation, whether that person was an African American or Hispanic or a woman or an Asian Pacific American?
I'm not sure I understand your question. I mean, I think we did whatever we could do whenever it was possible to recruit, retain, and promote minorities, whether they were blacks, Hispanics, females. I mean, if the opportunity presented itself that it was a black, then we tried to take advantage of that opportunity. I mean, you can't do it if the person, if the individual under consideration is a woman, obviously, but unless it was a black woman, or as I say in the case of B.B. Brown. But I think there was genuine sensitivity to the issue, and maybe there was a sentiment that we need to do more, and we thought we were doing as much as we could, but in the eyes of some it was not enough. And so over the period of time that I was there, I mean, there were ongoing discussions whether I was personally involved with them or not. I was not involved in all of them as they were ongoing.
All right, best of your recollection, in the eyes of the African American deputies, were you doing enough?
Objection. Lack of foundation, speculative.
Well, talk to Don Horton. I think he thinks I did a great job.
And you're not aware of any other complaints by African American deputies?
I mean, the complaints were made, and we attempted to handle them and address them as best we could. I don't, there's some things you can't do.
Judge, do you recall the arrest of a fugitive by the name of Maurice Lucas?
No.
No. Your Honor, do you know a gentleman by the name of Herbert Bryant?
Yes, I do.
Who is Mr. Bryant?
Mr. Bryant was a supporter of the Marshals Service. I would describe him as that.
All right. When did you first meet Mr. Bryant?
Probably sometime about the time I came into the Marshals Service.
Did you know him before you became director?
No. I mean, if I did, it would have been within weeks or a month before I officially went on board.
Do you recall whether Mr. Bryant introduced himself to you, or
Yeah, he introduced himself to me.
was this in a social context?
Yes.
Do you recall the social context that it was in?
Not really.
All right. What did he introduce himself as?
I don't know. What do you...
Did he state a position, or why was he interested in the Marshal Service?
I think he was, somebody who supported law enforcement.
All right. Were you familiar with something called the U.S. Marshals Foundation?
Yes.
What was that?
It was an organization that predated my arrival at the Marshal Service, and I think it was a group of private individuals who, like Mr. Bryant, wanted to have a private support for the activities of the Marshal Service and for law enforcement. In fact, I think one of the first things I did when I came on board was to travel to Oklahoma City, where the Marshal Service was having its national conference, and it was also being held in conjunction with the opening of or the dedication of a Marshal Service memorial.
what was Mr. Bryant's role in the Marshals Foundation, if you recall?